Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and I've got a tremendous guest today, a real special guy, not only a brilliant acoustic player, but just a cool guy and tons of experience. We're with the one and only John Knowles. John is one of the only 3 living certified guitar players as designated by Chet Atkins. The others, of course, are Tommy Emmanuel and Steve Warner. I interviewed Steve in episode 243. You can go to everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes and just search for Steve Warner, Wariner, to find that. John's dad was a preacher. Both of his parents loved music, and one of his uncles played guitar. He started off playing accordion, and then he got a plastic ukulele for his 11th birthday, which he learned inside and out. At 13, he discovered Chet Atkins, and at first he thought, man, this is impossible for anybody to play like that. Then, what do you know? He started playing along with his recordings. He played in bands in high school. He went to college, and check this out. He got a degree in physics and math, and he got a PhD in physics from TCU. So he's way off the intellectual chart. So you're going to have to forgive me on this one. I'll be stretching. John's worked with the finest fingerstyle and classical guitarists, including Chet Atkins, of course, Jerry Reed, Lenny Breau, and the Romero family. His music has been recorded by Chet, Jerry, the Romero family, and James Galway. His Gorilla song, which was co-written with his son Jay, is an international hit with recordings by Raffi and, John, I'm going to butcher this up, XUXA. How do you say that?
XUXA.
XUXA. Yes. And that's Chinese, I would imagine?
No, that's Brazil, Portuguese.
Oh, okay. XUXA. Great. Guitarists around the world also subscribe to and learn from John's newsletter. It's actually a hard copy newsletter called Fingerstyle Quarterly, and he's been producing that for quite some time, and we'll talk about that. His work has won him a Grammy and 2 Emmy nominations. And in 1996, like I said, Chet Atkins awarded John the first honorary certified guitar player degree. And in 2004, John was inducted into the National Thumb Pickers Hall of Fame for the second time. John, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
This is going to be fun.
It is. I'm looking forward to it. So let's get this big elephant out of the way. How on earth did you get interested in physics?
Well, my uncle who played the guitar worked for the electric company in Houston, and he was my close uncle I could ride a bicycle over to, so I saw his guitar playing. But he and I also did things like make radios, and remember when transistors first came out, he would take me by the shop and we would buy things. He taught me to solder and do all that. So I go off to college and I take those placement exams. They say, oh, you should be a musician. So I go into the music department and they found out I play the guitar. And this is 1960. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many colleges that have any guitar players in the music department yet.
Oh, wow.
They told me there's no way that I can be a guitar player and be a musician. And I remember saying, well, what about Segovia? And they said, well, Segovia. And I said, well? And he says, no. And then I said, well, what if I just, majored in something else and took some music classes? No, we're saving our music theory classes for our music students.
Wow.
As if I somehow take something away,
Yeah.
Just no way. The door was very closed at that time to the idea of guitar. 2 little pieces of revenge served cold, though, because ultimately, one of my guitar students becomes their first guitar professor.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. That's ridiculous. Did that fire you up? Like, give you like some righteous indignation when they told you that?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was a kid. I was, away from home, and so then I went back to the counselor's office, and they asked me, but what else have you been good at? And I said, well, I always did well in math and science, and so it led me to the physics department.
Wow.
And I hit it off. I love that stuff. I especially loved doing it in school. I had some really good professors. One of them especially was a really good theoretician who, it turns out, had worked in a team with Einstein and Bose back when the bomb was being made. And all
sure.
That stuff.
The Manhattan Project. That's right.
But I found out later that he was was right on up there. And he was funny and he was smart, and I just always had a good time working with him. So I was having fun. And so it didn't seem like and plus the music department was still calling on me when they ever needed a guitar player.
Oh, so you kind of sort of had your cake and eat it, sort of.
Yes,
I get you.
And I was having fun, and I was playing music, and I really wasn't thinking about. To me, the future was now, and I was having a good time in school. And it was only when I graduated and I met Becky along the way, and we got married, and when our son was born, I just realized all of a sudden I was on a path that didn't make sense. And it's really the way I articulated it to myself was, if I couldn't be real with myself, how was I going to be real with my son? I couldn't be a fake dad. And I remember saying something to Becky. So here we are with a son that's like 2 weeks old. And I'm saying, I think I'm doing the wrong thing. And her response was, which she says she never said, was, well, if we were 80 years old and sitting on the porch, and you said we should have done it, I would just die. So I'm thinking about
that's cool.
Putting bread on the table. She totally threw the long ball. And so between us, we made one of our first giant decisions, apart from things like getting married and all that. And so
that's so cool. So, and how long have you been married now?
53 years.
Man, God bless you. That's awesome, man. That's so cool. Very cool.
So we've navigated a lot of stuff together.
Oh, 53 years. Hell yeah. Yeah.
So now, that was our son being born. Of course, he's a professional songwriter now. We moved to Nashville, have a daughter, and she's in arts education in Austin. So it's so funny. So the physicist marries a school teacher and ends up with a musician and a potter,
Yeah.
Having artists for kids. So it was a complete rewrite of what we thought our plan was,
That's very cool, man. Congratulations.
And if we drive around, we went to Texas recently to visit family and friends. As we crossed the border, Becky just said, well, I'm so glad we did that. It doesn't even feel like a decision. It just feels like, well, of course. So.
That's great, man. I'm obviously glad it all worked out. So you quit physics to basically go and teach guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how was that? Like, did you have enough theory and knowledge yourself to teach? I mean, let me rephrase that. You're as long as you're one step ahead of your students, you could teach. What did you do? Because I know you're the kind of guy that you probably said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I got to get up to speed.
That's exactly what I told myself.
Yeah.
In fact, the conversation I had with myself was, I was way ahead as a player of most of the other guitar players because I've been at it a long time. And that turned out not to be an asset. It meant that I was over everybody's head. And I had always kind of had a couple of students who want to learn how to play. And I thought about it. I don't think any of them actually ever got better. They had a good time hanging out with me because I was that's not the same thing. And so I did tell myself, I'm going to teach guitar, and if that doesn't work, we'll do something else. And so I went into it knowing that I had a kind of a self-imposed guideline, which was my students have to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be a huge thing because it meant that it wasn't what I was doing, it was what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so in that process, I learned to listen to what they were doing, to become a partner in their learning rather than somebody who knew stuff they didn't. It wasn't like I was downloading info.
Yeah.
More like I was, like the music was here and the two of us together were a team trying to learn how to play the music. And when I made that shift, which is a pretty big paradigm shift, my students got better. And and then from there, of course, you do a lot of little things. You learn what you can learn. And then also I came into it at a time when the guitar, especially the classic guitar, just exploded. So there was an odd circumstance. The first thing I did was teach at a music store. It was brand new, called Frets and Strings, and they were importing high-end classic guitars.
And where was this?
This is in Dallas.
Okay.
So we had moved from Fort Worth, where we went to school, to Dallas, where Texas Instruments was. So this is down the road from where I was working at Texas Instruments. And one of the guys that owned that store had been in one of Segovia's master classes, and another of Segovia's students had moved to town and was teaching at the community college. So there were people around that kind of knew what was going on. And that's the first time I'd ever been around players who'd really had something besides listening to records over and over and over. And a funny political thing happened was they expanded the community college system in Dallas. And there was this big thing about all the rich neighborhoods thought they were going to end up with the college training, and the poor neighborhoods were afraid they would end up with auto repair. In order to get these campuses, they said anything that's taught at one campus has to be offered at all campuses.
Great.
So all of a sudden there was 4 new classic guitar professor openings, and nobody with a degree in music, including me.
Wow.
That degree in physics said close enough.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So all of a sudden I'm a college professor, like out of the blue. And they had a new theory teacher who was just out of college, who knew nothing about the guitar. And he and I sat down and had a cup of coffee, a long cup of coffee, and agreed that we would share what we had learned.
That's
so
great.
I took 2 years of music theory as if I were a student, except doing all those little piano exercises on the guitar. So it really gave me that part of my music education, which was missing up to that point. And I'm still in touch with Pete. I mean, I see him. He lives in Atlanta now. He's become kind of an arranger for a lot of college bands and stuff like that. But a seminal person for me to meet. As we talk, you realize that every now and then I walk into the room and there sits the right guy I need next.
Man, that's so cool. A few questions for you. First, you have a great voice, man. I'm listening to your voice. Like I just shut up and I'm listening to this. Like it's very warm and I don't know, man. It's just like your voice.
It might be a preacher voice.
Yeah, man. It's
granddad, as well as my dad. My granddad was really one of the first radio preachers back in the day when they were trying to figure out what to do with radio, and so I heard him growing up. And of course, I heard my dad through a microphone my whole life. And I would say, you're talking about the physics guitar fork in the road. Back at the church, the other fork in the road was how come I wasn't going to be a preacher?
Yeah, I'm sure. How did that? And how were your folks supportive of your decision to not be a preacher and B, get involved with music?
They didn't see that as a requirement at all.
That's really cool, though.
But the congregation thought, well, surely, because I was the oldest son, and I did stand. I've always been able to kind of speak well in front of people, and so people assume that's all it takes.
Well,
it takes more.
You got to be into it for starters, But no, your voice is great. The other question I thought of while you were saying this, you were in Dallas then when Kennedy got shot.
Yes, I was.
Man, can you talk about that for a few minutes? I know it's a total side topic, but I've never talked with any. This is pretty interesting.
So Becky and I actually were in Fort Worth, and that morning he was in Fort Worth still, and so he was speaking probably 7 o'clock in the morning. So Becky and I went down there and saw him that morning.
Oh, wow!
And we were pretty impressed. That would have been the first election we would have voted in. So both of us were thinking, this is who we're going to vote for. And but what I remember as much as anything, there was kind of a light drizzle and a little chill in the air, and everybody else had on a raincoat, but not Kennedy. He just looked like he didn't need a raincoat. It looked like it wasn't going to rain on him. Very charismatic, So he spoke to maybe a couple hundred people out in the parking lot in front of a hotel where he had stayed overnight. I'm sure the night before he had had dinner with all the politically important people. And then he drove off and headed to Dallas. We went back to campus and got the word in the student center that day that he'd been shot. And I would say that Becky and I really feel like we lived through a lot of the events that kind of surrounded that time when it was just a chunk of time when the country was kind of angry. I mean, people don't remember. It's hard to see that now, but there was.
Were they as angry as they are now? Everybody's pretty angry.
Me about now as much as anything as it feels like then. And I think people who don't remember what it felt like they think, well, it's just politics. No, it's when we're unhappy with ourselves. That's a different thing, And that worries me a lot more than any of the political shenanigans. Is that we're not working like a team right now.
Yeah, man.
So, because Becky and I saw that, we saw it happen, and you're right, that was quite a stunning moment.
Yeah. Wow. What was the? I'm sorry to ask you another question about this, but it's just so fascinating. Besides the anger, did the whole country, was it like hitting the pause button?
I think that there was a period of a few years there where we had, I think part of it was in Texas, you had Lyndon Johnson, and everybody thought Johnson should have been the president. You know? So Texas was angry. Texas was also angry because he was a Catholic, and that's hard to kind of envision nowadays. But now, as we see stuff surface again, we realize that there's a lot of unresolved stuff amongst us as a country. We're not very good at telling ourselves our own story and realizing we're all in this boat together. And every now and then it looks like we are, and then every now and then it looks like we aren't. You know, a lot of ambiguity going on. So
I know, and I think if people took care of their own house first, I think they'd be less preoccupied with what the guy next door is doing. You know,
there's that, and then also I think at its best, we realize that this is my life and this is what I'm doing, but everybody else may be doing something different. They're not doing what I'm not in charge of figuring out what's right about the world. It's tough.
Hello.
Have coffee, you know, and do my best effort to be an effective human being.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about that thing of leaving physics. And I remember when other people started asking us about our decision, you know, you can imagine we were quizzed.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And of all things, I remember saying, by now I kind of come clear what I was doing. I said, well, the universe needs another musician more than it needs another scientist.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty lofty. But on the other hand, that's kind of how it felt to me.
But if you believed it, I
as a human, you know.
I think what was lofty is to have that thought process and articulate that at that point in time.
Yeah.
You know, the idea is totally sound, but back then to articulate something that, you know, people probably thought you were crazy or, on drugs or what, you know what I'm saying? It was just, what does he mean? The universe, you know, that was not a supported.
Yeah, later in the 60s, people were talking like that. You know,
yeah. So. Right. But back then in a conservative area like Texas, I'm sure that was like, you know,
what?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay, John. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. And thanks for talking about the Kennedy stuff. I had never met anybody who's kind of like there when it happened. So, okay. So then you're teaching frets and strings, you're a university professor, and you wind up meeting Chet Atkins. How does this happen? And like, what does this encounter lead to for you?
Well, I had a friend who I was teaching his son some guitar lessons. And this guy was as rabid a Chet Atkins fan as anybody I ever met, even compared to me, you know. And he said that he wanted to meet Chet Atkins. And Chet's coming to Dallas to play with the symphony. And this is probably 73 or 4. And I said, well, I don't know Chet Atkins. He said, you're going to introduce yourself, and then you're going to introduce me. And so,
yes, sir.
You know, he was going to close the deal.
Yeah.
And so I went down, and I did figure out, knowing people in the orchestra, the best time to go is rehearsal, because that's when people are sitting around. You know?
Yeah.
And so we did, and I walked in to found Chet. His road manager, George, was there. And we were the only guitar players that showed up that day, curiously enough. And,
wait a minute. You're the only guitar players? I mean, at the rehearsal? At
the rehearsal. That morning. As a matter of fact, the other thing that happened is I'd been told that the rehearsal was going to be at 10, and it wasn't until 11. Chet had also been told it was going to be at 10, and it wasn't. So there's an hour.
Oh, so you're sitting around there, you and Chet Atkins.
Yeah, there's Yakkin.
Wow.
And I couldn't get over just how straight ahead and friendly he was. You know, I'd grown up wearing out that vinyl. And and then maybe 20 minutes in, he said to me, what did you say your name was? I said, John Knowles. He said, oh, yeah. He said, Rick Foster told me I should meet you. And Rick Foster is the guy who did some of the classical arrangements for Christopher Parkening. And Rick and I had met, 6 months earlier. And I didn't realize that he'd left Dallas and gone to Nashville. And they're talking. And I did the same thing later with Chet. I would say, if you're in Oklahoma, you should see so-and-so, So Chet had his ear to the ground, and I just didn't know that.
That's so cool, man. So you have someone pre-closed him for you.
I know. That's like I've been pre-introduced.
Yeah,
so,
man.
But get this. He's got his classic guitar, and he hands it to me, and he says, show me what you're working on. Now, Later, I thought, show me what you're working on is the most disarming thing he could have said. It was not amaze me, not showing your fastball, nothing. You and I are guitar players. What are you up to?
Yeah, right.
And I just immediately we became working partners. And so I played him a little bit of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer. I'd seen that movie.
I love that song.
And I said, I'm working it out. I turned the 6 string down and I'm doing this. And he said, yeah. He said, why don't you finish that up and send it to me? So within that hour, I'm working with him.
So when he said send it to me, how would you send it back then? I mean, he didn't have Logic, Pro Tools.
You have to sit down with the cassette player and play it.
Okay, so you literally send him a cassette recording, and then based on that, if you're going to do anything, then you come into the studio.
Yeah, and I said put a little note with it because I could write. He knew I could write things out, and so I said, and I put the note. I said, if you want me to write this out, so you can learn. I didn't know how he learned things, and he called me up and he said, don't bother writing it down. He said, I've already recorded it, but I need some more movie music, So it dawned on me, okay. All you had to do was give him a notion of what it was, and then he would adapt it. It's funny, when I would hear him play things that I had done, I could hear evidence of me, but I heard evidence of him already owning it in a way that he sounded like Chet Atkins, It's somebody who really had a clear sense of his own voice. So working with him did not mean telling him what notes to play. It meant putting the boat in the water and letting it run. So it was, so it was really, that was just really great. All of a sudden, I'm going from bang, 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 and the guys at Guitar Player magazine called me and said, we asked Chet to write a book, and he said he thinks you can do it, which he had no idea how I could write a book. So that first book of the arrangements that was on an album called Chet Goes to the Movies had 4 of my arrangements, and then I listened and transcribed the whole album and put it out as a book. That's when I found out how hard that was, incidentally. I learned a lot about his playing. I had always just kind of cobbled what I could and made up the rest. And you can't do that when you're putting out a book. I've had a real sense that I was about to write the book I wish I had had.
The
education that went with that was substantial.
And that must have been murder, because there wasn't like, pushing a button and going back. You had to lift the needle and just listen to it hundreds and hundreds of times, each little section.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And I put it on a cassette because that made it a little. He mailed me the acetate disc that they made, to a reference disc before they manufactured it. So I got it before it came out, but not much. I would say 6 months from when he wrapped it up, I had the book turned in, and the album was out.
That's pretty tough when you get a full-time job, you got a kid, and then you're working. I'm sure you were burning the midnight candle every single night to do this.
It's one of those things, people ask me from time to time about the physics thing and the guitar thing. To me, I don't think of myself as a physicist anymore, but what I learned in applying myself and being diligent in taking big things and breaking them into small chunks and pressing on and, taking on a big problem. This was extremely helpful to me. I realized that I remember counting measures and figuring out how many pages that would be.
Yeah.
So I would finish a page, I knew how much more I had to do. And I wasn't learning to play the tunes. I would learn to play 8 bars.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Write that down. And if you play along with it, then you could tell whether or not you were right or not by comparing what I was doing with what was there. And there were a few things I couldn't figure out.
Sure.
So I left space.
Yeah.
And so later on, when I sat down with him, I had him show me how to do things.
Okay.
Especially those harmonics that he would do. I had never done that. And I called him up one day and I said, so how are you doing that? And he told me, and I'm sitting there and he says, you don't get it, do you? And I said, no. And he said, sleep on it and call me in the morning. I did. And okay, I got it. But I didn't realize that half of those notes were harmonics and half of them were regular notes, and they were the mingling effect created that cascading effect we all know today.
So you must have been in over the moon, walking on the clouds. Here you go to but it's really cool. your buddy is the one who convinced you to go to this thing.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, think of all the serendipitous things that had to happen to make this, man. It's like statistically impossible, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. And as a matter of fact, I would say there is a lot of mornings when I'm sitting there having a cup of coffee, Becky out of the blue will say, "You realize you're a lucky guy." And I said, "Oh, yeah." Because I do feel like there are a number of times when I've just been where I needed to be to take my next steps, and just over the moon, it's I don't know what that is. I see my daughter really has that same skill of kind of being where she needs to be to meet the right people to do the next work she wants to do. So I think it's a thing. I just don't know what to call it.
But then it's the other argument is it a thing, or is it your destiny is this is what you were designed to do and you're just fulfilling that somehow? I don't know. Who I don't know how that.
I think that you're right, but I think the way destiny works is you have to do your homework and then you have to pay attention. That's the two skills.
Yeah. You
I've seen a lot of people. I'm thinking, you've done all this and nothing's happened, and they've stayed at home and they haven't gone out to meet people. But there again, the preacher's son skills, where you shake hands,
kissing babies,
becomes a part of it.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, that's just politics." Well, yeah, I guess so, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
Make yourself available to your destiny. You got to let your destiny know you're up for it.
Yeah, man. You have to. Nothing happens. The phone just doesn't ring. You have to trigger something to make an event happen. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You can't, do nothing. And people are sometimes sitting and waiting for stuff to happen. That's just not how life works, man.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, so I'd left Texas Instruments. And so I guess maybe 3.5 years later, I'm meeting Chet Atkins. But before that, I've gone to Spain and studied in Segovia's class. Segovia wasn't there that year. But his teaching assistant, Jose Tomas, was amazing. And what I learned from him about transcribing and adapting things for the guitar, what worked on the guitar, what didn't, technical issues. So I'd really kind of redefined my technique in a major way. By now, I've dropped my thumb pick. I'm not playing electric guitar. So by the time I meet Chet Atkins, I look like a really different player, except that I've grown up on that vinyl. So I've got this kind of, schizophrenic approach, which turned out to be really valuable to Chet, because he didn't need a Chet replica. He knew how to be Chet Atkins.
Sure.
Did he know? I mean, it was really, but now what I was like another wing of the enterprise.
Yeah.
And so part of it was being able to think back and forth with him. Then the other part of it was being able to write down what he had done. And this was just at a time when people were learning enough. A couple of the first publishers I worked with thought, "Oh my goodness, people aren't going to be able to play this stuff." And I'd seen the classic guitar players play what Segovia was playing because it was there written out and there were teachers. So I knew that if we wrote it out, and there were plenty of people who had already figured it out like I had.
Sure.
I say plenty, a dozen.
The people who wanted to, who were meant enough to. Yeah. It wasn't like flying to the moon, It was a doable, tangible task. You just had to do the work.
Yeah. But then after a while, as soon as the materials are out there, of course, now it's up another notch because you've got all the book, but you've got YouTube and people have seen everybody. I mean, I don't remember seeing Chet maybe twice before I met him, once on TV and once at one of those Gretsch demos. And other than that, I was flying. It was an instrument landing, for me.
Yeah.
Nothing to see.
The cool thing is, too, that I want to point out is you were working your ass off for those 3 years, man. You were taking lessons. You were learning theory. Here you are married with a family. You're going over to Spain to study. So, I mean, you paid. It's not like this was. No. I'm always a little there is a matter of luck in it, but there's also you kind of contributed a lot to that luck, because if you hadn't have done any of these things, which was part of the appeal to Chet, that, wow, this guy's a worker. He's got a good work ethic. Look what he did. He knows this. He studied with Segovia's assistant. He went to class. And people sort of like, I think, discount stuff like that. Oh, he was in the right place at the right time. Yeah, but if you hadn't have done any of that stuff, you just would have shaken Chet's hand and had a nice conversation. Yeah, and say, "Oh, that was cool," you wouldn't be working with him, So I think.
I think you're really right. I think if you look in the dictionary under luck, it says "see preparation."
Yeah, man. What's that? You know that expression, the byproduct of preparation and hard work, man. You know, it's that's great, man. I'm really that's wonderful. Okay, so now you're working with Chet, and what happens then? So you're doing this long distance stuff where you're helping him with transcriptions and with books. What happens next? How does that escalate?
So we get the book pretty much drafted, and now I need to really sit down with him and figure out if I've got it right and do some face-to-face proofing. And so Becky and Jay and I hop in the car and drive to Nashville. And Jay, who is now 5, has been watching me do this. As a matter of fact, he recommended one of the tunes that ended up on the album. He says, if you're doing movie music, Dad, you need to get the cartoon music. And he says, give me your cassette player and I'll record it on Saturday when the cartoons come on.
That's so funny.
The Bugs Bunny stuff.
The Bugs Bunny was great. Who was that? What was that guy's name again? Chet. Fantastic scores, man. Just tremendous scores on that Bugs Bunny stuff.
And so that one of the things I did was I worked up and sent it to Chet as one of the things. But that was my son who suggested that, So he was already thinking like a musician and whatnot. So he wants to go he said, Dad, I'll sit on the couch and won't say anything. I just want to watch you guys do this. So I take him to Chet's office with me.
Yeah.
And introduce him to Chet and sit him on the couch. And Jay's silent. And we get through. So we're proofing stuff and I'm seeing how Chet does things. And I'm noticing he doesn't remember what he did. And so it's dawning on me, he just did this. He did not perfect or memorize this stuff. He just played it. And now that he's hearing it, he has to go back and listen and pick up his guitar. This is probably what I did. And so and I thought, because I've been hanging around classical players, and I realized his stuff sounds so polished and so prepared, and yet there's a huge chunk of spontaneity in it that I had never estimated from what I was hearing. So anyhow, we're doing all that, and it's lunchtime, and Chet says, well, I've got a lunch appointment. Why don't you and Jay go get a sandwich, and we'll come back and finish this up. And in walks Chet's lunch appointment, and it's Shel Silverstein.
Wow, the author.
Yes.
That's pretty. That's pretty wild.
So Jay has been quiet, but at this point, he cannot be quiet any longer.
Because he writes children's books.
He knows who that is,
Yeah.
And Chet Atkins is the old guy Dad's working with, but Shel Silverstein wrote
Where the Wild Things Are, didn't he? Was that him? Yeah.
No, that's Maurice Sendak.
Okay, right.
Into the Sidewalk and all those poems. Sarah, Cynthia, Sylvia Stout never would take the garbage out. So Jay says, hey, Dad, in a stage whisper, let's sing our song for Chet and Shel. And he and I had written the Gorilla song a couple of years earlier, and we sang.
And how old is your son at the time? I thought you said he's 5. So you wrote the Gorilla song with him when he was 3?
He was about 3.5 or 4, yeah.
So he's obviously like gifted,
He's totally into it. Yeah.
Intellectually gifted.
I'll back up and I'll tell you that story, but let me tell you this is about the author.
Yeah.
So we sing the song, and Chet said, now not talking to me, but talking to Jay. He said, Jay, would you sing that song again? I'd like to make a recording of it so I can have it. And Jay says, okay. And so now he's holding, remember those old Panasonic cassette players we all had?
Yeah.
He holds that thing up in front of my son, and I'm playing the guitar, and I'm looking at my guitar hero, and he's interacting with my son instead of me.
This has got to be surreal to you.
Else, about Chet. And so we sing the Gorilla song again, and then he turns to Jay, and he says, so you and your dad wrote this song? He said, yeah. And he said, well, what do you call it? And Jay said, the Gorilla song. And so he writes the Gorilla song on the cassette, and he said, and do you put your name first? So it's by Jay Knowles and John Knowles.
That's great, man.
He puts it in his desk drawer, which I don't realize this at the time, but that's where he puts stuff that he's going to do something with. And for the longest time, he tried to figure out who should record that song, but none of us knew, what to do with it at all. So if I back up a second and have the flashback to tell you that at breakfast one morning, a year and a half earlier than that, Jay says, hey, Dad, let's write a song, because I'm practicing guitar at the breakfast table, like a lot of your listeners, I would guess.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, do you know how to write songs? And he said, oh yeah. He said, you make them up. I thought, well, you can't argue with that. And I said, well, what are we going to write about? And he looked at the breakfast table and he said, this banana. And I said, well, what about that banana? And he said, a monkey is eating it. And then he said, no, a gorilla is eating it. So, and I think what he was thinking was that show, George of the Jungle.
George of the Jungle, yeah. Friend to you and me.
Look out for that tree.
Mm-hmm.
So, without doing anything, I just picked up my guitar and I said, if I were a gorilla, la 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 la, I'd eat me a banana, na 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 na. And I stopped to see what he would say. And he said, make him swing through the trees, Dad. And so I said, I live in a tree house and swing on a vine. And he didn't say anything. So I said, but one thing is sure, I would love you. And so we had a verse.
Were you recording this or writing it down or anything?
No, now we wrote it down later, And I'd say over several weeks, we thought if I was this and if I was that, and we knew it was wordplay. It wasn't hard to explain to him. Each verse had to be, the same, with the same number of words. And he was the one that thought up, I thought up the tuba. He thought up the spaceship. Becky said something about the daisy where you pull your flowers, petals out, she loves me not. But no matter what, I would love you. So we did all that stuff together and put it together. And I came up with the idea of kind of a chorus that would have the same chord progression so that you could sing the chorus at the same time you sang the verses. And was
this the first song you wrote as well?
Well, I had written one when I was about 11 or 12, just because our family kind of did verses a lot.
Sure.
I grew up around that. I wrote a song about a gunfighter who shot himself in the foot after my dad told me the story, about some Texas guy who shot himself trying to do a fast cross. So I wrote a song called No Toes Joe back then. So I knew how to do it, But this is the first time I've thought of myself like a songwriter and wrote a song with Jay. And so anyhow, and that was the song we sent for Shell that day. And what I remember as much as anything was Chet turning to Jay and saying, you need to write more songs. So here he is essentially welcoming Jay as a child into the world of being a song. And that's what Jay does now. So he's a professional songwriter.
That's so cool.
And,
I listened to this song yesterday. It's an adorable, it's just a cute little song, man. It's really,
When it sat around gathering dust for a long time, and I went down to a downtown hotel to play, to see a friend of mine, Terry Wedding, who hung out with Lenny Breau a lot, and play a jazz gig at a hotel. And I'm sitting there, and he wanted to take a break, and he said, well, I'll take a break. Do that song you and your son wrote. So I did the gorilla song during the break, and in the house is Raffi's band.
Oh, man.
I mean, all the ways you try to pitch a song. And so one of them comes over to me and says,
you talk about, again, another situation. The guy was right in the room waiting for you.
Yeah. So they said, can we go get Raffi? He's upstairs and you do the song for him. And I thought, I don't know who Raffi is, because I don't know.
Sure.
I said, sure. So I did, and Raffi liked it. And he was putting on a show at the hotel at the Coliseum next door the next night. So he gave us tickets and told Jay and I to come and bring the set of the song and all this kind of stuff. So that's how we got the song, to Raffi.
Is that the easiest pitch song you've ever done, I bet?
Oh, yeah. And it's a great version of it. And later on, I met some of the musicians who played on the record as you travel around, and Raffi and I have stayed in touch. I have a ton of respect for him, not just as a musician, but as a human who kind of leveraged his fame in a positive way for kids in the future. And, he's been on UN committees and been a delegate all over the world for future. He thinks of the politics as voting so that your grandchildren get a benefit from what you're voting for. It's a very simple notion. It's very powerful, So budgets, climate, whatever it is, how's this going to affect my grandchild?
Sure. So let me ask you this. How old was your son when he got royalty checks?
Well, by this time, he has actually signed on to be a professional songwriter. So he's in his 20s. And as a matter of fact, he's a little worried. He says, Dad, I'm trying to get established as a songwriter, and Raffi's going to cut our songs. I don't want to be pigeonholed as a kid songwriter, you know. And I said, well, we'll keep it low for a while, you know. Well, before Raffi's record came out, Jay got a George straight cut. Problem solved.
Problem solved. There you go, man. That's it's amazing though, the gestation. That was like a 15, 16 year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You know, from, you know, birth to delivery.
Yeah.
Wow.
And by that time I would do it every now and then, and Jay and I would do it together, and we always liked it, always hung out there, but nobody knew what to do with it, but it was just waiting, you know, for Raffi.
You're lucky nobody stole it.
Oh, well, no, because we had it. It was pretty well documented that it was ours.
Okay.
Okay. And that's the other thing I learned from Chet was copyrights and all that.
Oh, okay. So you had it copywritten and all taken care of that. So, okay, great. Yeah.
And so, and what happened is when Raffi did it, this South American, a Brazilian artist, XUXA, who was kind of halfway between Mr. Rogers and Madonna, you know, if there's such a combination. You know,
wait a minute. It's
something
like
for the kids and something for the grown-ups.
Polar opposites.
I know. She's extremely well known down there. As a matter of fact, remember the soccer player Pele?
Oh, of course, sure.
She and Pele were an item for a while.
Oh,
you know?
okay.
Really big, and it was a big hit down there. And so we learned how to have our publishing company have a partnership with a Brazilian company and do all that stuff. I think that's one of the other big outcomes from Chet is learning all that business stuff.
Yeah.
And setting things up so that, as he said, you got to watch your pennies so you can count your dollars later. You know, is what he would say about the music business.
I've met now two other people that have had pretty intimate relationships with him. Steve being one, and then later on Pat Burgessson.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And he was very nurturing in that way with people. He seemed to be the kind of individual that, you know, if he was taking you under his wing, he wanted to give you the full benefit of, you know, sharing the information he knew, almost in a fatherly type of way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. I have said that I feel like, looking back, that I had a dad and a music dad.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that.
Deal, you know, so.
Yeah, I could see that. What a benefit to have that guy as a music dad. You know, having anybody is like a great, but having Chet.
Yeah, and there was so much more to him than I suspected from listening to the guitar records. I didn't know what else he was doing. I got to town and I realized he was the unofficial mayor of Nashville. You know, that people all over the town, not just musicians, knew him and consulted with him, and he was buying real estate all over town. He knew which direction the town was going in, so he was definitely part of the community, not just part of the music business.
Man, you know who strikes me like that now? Smart guy is Joe Glazer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's you know, like a Yoda, you know, and he's very kind, very, you know, just a very righteous guy, giving, and he's involved in a lot. He's a very smart guy, you know, and
you know, and I tell you, there's something going on there, and I've called it generosity of spirit. That is not just that there's like knowing that it's important to share, and modeling that in a very direct way, so that all of us who kind of had a chance to hang around Chet kind of step into that a little bit. You know, we something that was just, we were brought up that way.
Yeah.
Pat's that way, and Steve is that way. Tommy's that way. Are the ones that I really see the most. And others that, you know, Earl Clue and Mark Knopfler, I mean, they've all got that quality, you know, which part of it, I guess, is who he selected, but part of it is how he interacted with people. He just demonstrated that as a way of working.
Yeah, and I think you can't help but, especially if you're younger and you get exposed to that as a mentorship, that's kind of a natural thing that you're then going to act like that. Right.
I think that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. With some great stories. Just taking some notes here. Thank you. Okay. So talk about, man, I don't even know where to start. Let's just talk a little more, Chet. Top 3 things that you learned or got from your experience and relationship with him, if you can answer that question?
Well, one thing I think is that he really taught me, and this is kind of what we referred to already, is how to kind of make a living at this. And I was already doing pretty well in the sense that I'd gotten some jobs that paid and so forth. But to kind of think about the publications and the copyrights and how to get rights to put songs in music and how to talk to publishers and all that stuff. And I remember even some things as simple as the first time I did those movie arrangements, he said, you should send me a bill. And he says, and I think what people are charging me right now is like $200 for a string arrangement, like on a track. So why don't you just send me a bill for $200 for each one of these tunes that you've arranged for me? And then he said, and that entertainer, he said, I think that's public domain, which means we can copyright your arrangement. And his wife, Leona, was kind of running their company. So why don't you get with Leona and have her draw up something and go make sure that you've got a published copyright, and then we should get you over to BMI. And he did all this stuff.
Wow, how cool is that, man?
To make sure I was not going to be
exposed. Wow.
So that handful of steps that took place within, weeks of being in town, join the union, that kind of stuff, just kind of made me a player. And sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years to do that stuff. So he did that with a lot of people. It'd be like a real fast forward move. And within weeks, you were kind of plugged into the way the town worked.
Was it a tough decision to,
was that whole connection to the town. And then he would also take me to lunch. And I realized it wasn't just buying sandwiches. It was letting me be seen with him.
Oh, yeah.
Introduction moments. This is the Zen master of knowing where your clout lies. So we're over at Acuff Rose Music, and I forgot when we went by that he wanted to see somebody, but Wesley Rose is there. And so his dad, Fred, is the founder of the company, no longer living at that point. And Chet says to Wesley, Wesley says, John Knowles, don't you?
Because right.
But what Chet's doing, he's elevating.
Positioning, man.
This is the guy, surely that guy like you knows who John is.
Yeah.
And Wesley says, yeah, good to see you again, John. Shakes my hand.
And you know who the hell.
I've never met him. Totally shakes my hand. And I thought, oh man.
This is it.
And the thing is, from then on, we did know each other.
Right. That's so funny.
And I realized the town is kind of like that, even still, I remember one time I was at a publisher's Christmas party, and somebody had asked me to show them how to play the Christmas song because it had some odd chords in it. So I'm playing the Christmas song, and all of a sudden I realized there's somebody singing with me. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and it's Emmylou Harris. She's walked in, and they say that Santa's on her way with her voice, not mine. And we finished up, and somebody says, so Emmylou, you and John know each other? She said, sure.
How cool is that?
Sung, right? No, what better introduction can you ask for? And so, I see her from time to time, and we both remember that that's how we met, was in the middle of a song. So the town is still got that kind of textural, we all belong here, and we're all musicians and creators, that so supportive of the community. Then I think one of the other things I learned from Chet is occasionally when he would want to write something, he would have half of an idea, but instead of writing it himself, he would call somebody in and tell them what he was working on and then finish it together. So when I saw that kind of partnership co-write thing at first, which is very big in the town, I learned it first from Chet. And he'd get halfway into something and call me up and say, I want to play and show you what I'm working on and get you to help me finish it. So he's inviting me in to be a co-writer with him. And he said, I've got it up to here, but I'm not sure what happens next. And I said, well, what about this? So later on, some of the co-written instrumentals that we did together are kind of born out of that back and forth conversation about writing together. So I'd say that's another giant thing, and then the other one would have to be the ability to maybe recognize a project that was worth doing. And I remember probably, this is maybe 2 or 3 years after I moved here, Chet and I and Shel Silverstein and Leona Boyd are at lunch. And out of the blue, Shel Silverstein describes this idea for a project. He said, it's like a string quartet, but with guitar players, and you guys are all in tuxedos. And he was describing the album cover, the Nashville Guitar Quartet, which is what it is. And he says, and you would play some music from all over the place, and he kind of waved his hands like that, And so I went home from that lunch, and by then I'd learned when somebody dangles an idea like that in front of Chet, take steps, do something. Don't just, it's not just a lunch conversation.
Yeah.
And so I got in touch with John Pell, who at that point was already beginning to teach some at Belmont, but he and I had worked together, and I knew he was a good arranger. And I said, here's this idea. Let's get our 4-track tape recorders out and record a couple of quartets and pitch them back to Chet while this idea is still something he remembers. So Pell and I went in and played him. I think we played the Washington Post March and something John had written to show Chet what our idea was. And I remember Chet just kind of sitting there for what felt like an eternity, but I'm sure it was 30 seconds. And he said, well, let me get Leona on the phone and see what her schedule is. And they're all of a sudden we got an album project, So that's what projects smell like when they're being born. It's a good idea being dangled, and then somebody taking steps.
Well, you took fast action, and that's the other key to getting stuff done. You got to take fast action. You can't sit around and wait because it dies. And one thing, the co-write, I would assume the thought behind that is, hey, I'd rather get 50% of something than 100% of nothing, basically. That,
and I think also is his way of inviting the creative person in that he thought might be a good song finisher. It was a matter of who he was asking. He was to think about improving product. And so if you look back at a lot of those things that are Chet co-writes, Randy Goodrum, the keyboard player in this band, who wrote songs like Bluer Than Blue. I mean, he's a real good songwriter. And but he finished up things like Happy Again. And I think Chet wrote Happy Again. I'm trying to think. To Be or Not to Be is a co-write, I think, with Randy. And there are others. So that, and Randy's thinking keyboardy, thinking of extended harmonies and things like that. Chet and I wrote one thing that had lyrics together. He said, I've got this idea, and he played me the first few bars of East Tennessee Christmas, calling to me, da 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 da, And then so we kind of worked on it, and he said, come back over to the house later after dinner. We finished it that evening. And what I remember is thinking about the bridge, and I said, well, you know how in the weather here in Tennessee, sometimes it snows and sometimes it doesn't. Instead of White Christmas, let's sing We Don't Know What We're going to Have for Christmas. And this, he had picked up this expression, don't you know, from Haskell Hale, the guitar builder up in Kentucky. So he would say, da-da-da-da-da-da, don't you know? And you probably heard Pat Bergeson say, don't you know?
Yeah, I think I have, actually.
No. So I said, well, it might snow, but don't you know, I don't care. And it would be the best of Christmases if you were there. And so then we decided what chords went with it, but just all kind of tumbled out, but also very natural conversational stuff that was already, in the room. And so then he recorded it on a Christmas album. And this is another thing about Chet. So he asked me to sing background vocals on that. And nobody had ever asked me to do that. And so I found out is I can sing, but I'm a terrible background singer because I can't track the singer. I stick out like the great dancer in a chorus line, Yes, but no. And so I've realized I'm pretty ducked in the mix, as we say. But he still wanted to see if I could do it. He would all the time. Matter of fact, I would say he gave me more opportunities than I even knew what to do with. He just wanted to make sure that if there was something I should be developing, that I should make a run at it, So,
man, what a kind, human being.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Really, you don't. You come across someone like that in your life, it's pretty tremendous to have that interaction.
I'll mention one other story. He and I were doing an instructional video when that first came out, And it wasn't very big yet. Jack Nicklaus had a golf one, and Jane Fonda had an exercise one. And,
I remember that with the socks and the leotards.
That was our only two models at that point. And I stole from Jane Fonda was the idea that Jane Fonda could do all that stuff, but if you watch her do it, you think, well, yeah, Jane Fonda. But there was all these other people, including a couple of lummoxes out
in the room.
Over the log to give you somebody to identify with. So we'll do the same thing with this guitar thing. We'll get Chet and a couple of my students. So if the students can do it, it's not just
it becomes tangible. Yeah, totally.
So we've kind of worked all this stuff up, and we're over there the first day, and we're going to record some of the singing in advance of the video shoot and just lip sync the singing so we don't have too many variables. So we're in there and we're singing. I think it was On Top of Old Smoky. And the kids who have known me a long time and have met Chet are now in Chet's basement, and they're freaking out. They just cannot calm down, And Chet says to me, he says, John, I need to make some phone calls. Why don't you guys run it a couple times, and we'll record it. He leaves the room. So now it's me and my kids. And we're in Chet's basement. I'm stopping and starting the tape, and we're singing and everything. And all of a sudden, in the middle of a verse, Chet's back in the room with his arms all around their shoulders, all covered with snow, just singing, And from then on, it was cool. And I thought, he didn't have to make any phone calls. He just knew to turn the temperature down a little bit.
Yeah.
So many times he's worked with artists and wanted to get the best music out of them. Just like when he had met me and said, "Show me what you're working on." He was just always dialing down the heat and making it easy to work. By the time he's in the Hall of Fame and he's Grammys and all this, it's pretty easy to be overwhelmed by him.
So he had a very good sense of interactive dynamics between people. I mean, this is totally speculation. Where do you think he got that from?
I think he got it from other people he worked with. I've heard him talk a lot about Fred Rose, and I heard him talk a lot about Steve Scholes, who was kind of the RCA guy who picked Chet out and said, "You should be producing records," and ultimately be the vice president of the Nashville operation. And then he also early on was working with Homer and Jethro, excellent musicians. So he probably learned a whole lot about how to collaborate and work with and things like that. My guess is, and also he's kind of he was kind of shy in a lot of ways, and I think he probably cultivated some social skills on purpose, because he wanted to accomplish certain things. So he knew. Every now and then I realized I would hear him say something that almost sounded like he's reminding himself to ask how the kids are and how's it going.
Yeah.
He was not a chit chat guy, but he taught himself some chit chat, to kind of get along. But he was really absolutely ninja level at interacting with people.
Yeah.
I didn't know who to count on and recognize good ideas. And he knew songs inside and out. Holy smoke.
That's awesome, man. Really. And when did you move to Nashville?
So that we moved, after the movie project, the entertainer won a Grammy. And I'm the arranger. Chet gets
right.
I get the arranger credit. And so I called him up and I said, so if I was in Nashville, I said, could we do some more work together? And he said, well, what are you doing in Dallas? And I told him, he said, well, we do all that stuff here. And I remember telling Pat the same thing. Pat says, well, I'm doing weddings and bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, he's doing that up. You heard that interview when Pat was saying that. Yeah. That was amazing. He goes, I'm doing weddings and bar mitzvahs, and it's freezing outside, and I'm living in a ghetto. And like Chet says, he goes, it wasn't tough for me to come down there. That was funny. So then you moved down there with sort of like his blessing invite that you'll have work for you and your family.
That was not one to say, come to Nashville, I'll make you a star, because that's too big a burden. But he kind of helped me think through the process. And we got here, made sure I had connected with people. I was doing lead sheets for publishers, and he introduced me to the people over at Blair School of Music, which is where I started teaching. Not bad to have an intro like that.
Yeah, from Chet Atkins, yeah.
And then he also introduced me to the people at the Country Music Hall of Fame. So the two actual jobs I had in town were at the music school and at the Hall of Fame. The rest of the time I've been freelance as a Nashville musician.
That's great, man. Good stories. Thank you. Hey, talk about Fingerstyle Quarterly, that's your newsletter. You've been doing it a long time. What prompted you to do a newsletter? What's in there? How long have you been doing it? How often does it come out?
So the idea came from the fact that Chet and I had been doing articles for Guitar Player and Frets magazine, and that would be a monthly article, but we would do 2 or 3 of them at once and then send them in, and they would get together again. So somebody bought the publication and decided they didn't want to run those articles anymore. I think they were looking at a younger demographic or something. And so I had this thing of sitting down with Chet and doing these articles, and I thought, well, if they're not going to do it, I will. So the initial idea for the quarterly was really the columns in the guitar magazine.
Yeah.
With how-tos and music. And then I also had discovered that people needed to hear this stuff to be able to play it. So I just started, originally it came with a cassette. So a newsletter, 16-page newsletter with music, articles, no ads, no big, color pictures, nothing. And a cassette. And I think when I initially announced it, I got about 60 people said they wanted to do it. And I said, great. And so it really came out of my way of kind of bringing all these things I'd done, the books, the articles, working with Chet. And I just brought it in-house, and we started doing it. By that time, I guess Jay's in high school, and he's duplicating cassettes for me and stuff like that. So, and then as it became possible to burn CDs, luckily I'd been recording everything digitally, so I just had to remaster.
Oh, great.
CD. And now I think the next big generation is going to be to lose the CD and go for audio downloads, because people don't have CD players anymore. No cars, computers, nothing.
Not at all. So
I've gone from pen and ink to software on the music side and on the audio side, from cassettes to CDs to downloads. So I've lived through all these. I've had to kind of constantly reinvent my way of talking to people.
How many pages is the journal?
Each issue is 16.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Oh, it is a lot of work. Yeah. And I had a friend I had 2 or 3 people help me. Because the other thing I learned from Chet, the co-write thing, that means find a partner.
Yeah.
So a graphic designer who I'd grown up with from age 13 to help me do the layout. And another friend of mine who had a newsletter. So he knew what to put on page 1, where to put the table of contents, how to make sure people opened up and used it, So I learned all that kind of newsletter lingo.
Right. That's a lot of work. I've published newsletters in probably 3 or 4 different industries, and 16 pages is a beefy newsletter, man. It really is. And then you have a cassette, and how it comes out 4 times a year. It got slowed down because it was hard to do. Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work.
Some of my longtime supporters called it Fingerstyle occasionally. And then what I finally did a couple of years ago, I decided I had 40 complete issues, and I realized I don't need more music. I need to reach more people. And so out of all that, that's where the relationship with TrueFire comes in, because I realized I've got all this material, but I could teach it in a video format instead of an audio format.
Gotcha.
And then some things you can do with video that you just wouldn't dream of doing in a newsletter format. So currently, everything is still available. You go to the website. And now I've had people start saying, can I buy the whole library? And the answer is, you betcha, because the mailing one at a time thing is the expensive part. Put them in a box, and the postage is $13.
Yeah.
And about individually, it's like $250. So cut the price way back, make a deal for everybody. So we've started calling that the whole enchilada, which is fancy for the library. So.
Great. And so if you want to check that out, if you're into fingerstyle or you want to learn more about fingerstyle, go to John Knowles, KNOWLES.com. And it's right on there as Fingerstyle Quarterly or Fingerstyle periodically or occasionally. The whole enchilada.
And then one of the things there's a thing where you can link and get a download sample issue that has a tune to learn. You can kind of see.
Oh, great.
So
great. Yeah. So go there and check out the samples at least. And then if you're into it, buy the whole enchilada.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you could answer this one because you've been involved in so many really cool projects.
Mm-hmm.
What are the is it possible to identify top 3 musical experiences, either, because of the quality of the work you did or the self-satisfaction, the hang, the overall music?
Yeah, I saw that question, and there's two of them popped right up when I saw that. One of them really is the Nashville Guitar Quartet record with Chet, because I was there from the conception. I helped actualize it. I got to do some arranging. I got to record with people that had such different styles of working. By that point, Chet had all those years doing what he did. John Pell was a really good arranger and kind of a good studio player, had been a road musician. Leona Boyd was a classical player and was not used to overdubbing and those kind of things. So each one of us was coming with a different skill set and a different sense of music, and we were trying to work together as a team. So a couple of the tracks, John Pell and I would start the tracks, and then they would add parts. A couple of them, Leona and I started, and a couple of them, Chet and I started. And once or twice, we were all four together and would record as a group. So seeing production techniques, one of my favorite moments out of that one was Chet and I did, which is not on the album, but we had come up with an arrangement to play Pomp and Circumstance on the graduation tour. Yeah. And so he and I were going to start it, and we had it worked out where at the tag of it, we would play school days, dear old golden rule days, just a little to kind of take it out.
Yeah.
And so we are in Chet's basement, and we're all set up, and he walks in the control room. There's no engineer. He's the engineer. Starts the tape, walks back out into the space, and he's making like a shush sound, like this, and we sit down, and he silently counts 2, 3, 4, and then we start playing, and we get down to the end, and it's ringing out, and he does that same little shush sound, and then tiptoes out and turns the tape off. And I thought, and that's the first time I'd really sat down and played face to face with him. Nobody else in the room, nobody saying, okay, rolling, or nothing like that. And one take, and I've got to find that tape somewhere. I know it exists, because I just felt like that's what it feels like to be him when he turns the red light on. Because hanging around the office, Chet was one thing, but Chet, when the red light went on, was a whole other ball game. He had a level of concentration and focus, and at that moment, he and I were just locked on the Vulcan mind meld, that all of us musicians aspire to. And then after we had the project all done, he and I did a lot of the mixing, because at that point, there's no automated board. So if there's 4 parts and people are coming and going, it takes 4 hands. So we rehearse mixing, and then all the mixes are live. So I learned so much from him at that point about where to put things in the audio spectrum, and just unbelievable what all I learned hanging with him.
And this is the one where the genesis was Shel Silverstein saying, "I had a vision."
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But like I said, to be involved in something from start to finish.
Yeah.
Actually, we also did some video of us in the studio kind of reenacting the quartet. And we were scheduled to go out and do a promotional tour, which I had never done. And RCA kind of was backing off from Chet. So he got real mad at him. It wasn't long after that he went to CBS and came with a whole different notion of where his career should go next. Always the innovator, and always what's next.
Well, it's interesting. Steve told a story, I don't know if you heard his interview, where he was torn or conflicted between who to sign with, and Chet couldn't come out and say, "I'm going to be leaving here," but he said, "Man, I think you need to, probably move if you're feeling uncomfortable," or something like that. So it was very, again, looking out for him, in a paternal way, sort of.
Yeah. Well, and this is at that time when Gretsch Guitars is struggling with itself. There's been a big fire at the Brooklyn, or the Arkansas, whichever factory it was. And the company's been sold. And so Gretsch, that relationship is kind of not everything he wants it to be. The RCA relationship is not what he wants it to be. And Chet was really loyal, So at some point, for him to leave CBS and leave Gretsch all within that same, leave RCA.
RCA, yeah.
And go to Gibson and CBS was a huge thing for him, not at all like he normally operated. So yes, there was a big thing. And I feel like RCA's response to this quartet record, Chet had said, said, "Don't rent your tuxedo yet." He said, "But I think we're going to be on Tonight Show." And it was really planned out, so, but it just didn't happen. And this is also at the same time, though, that RCA, which Chet's no longer the vice president of at that point, Jerry Bradley has taken up the label. And and Joe Galante is not one of the players there. This is when the outlaw thing happens, so you can see what RCA is thinking. Oh man, we're going to ride this outlaw pony. This old guitar player is not where it's at right now. And
yeah.
Chet was not interested, not used to being dismissed.
Well, sure.
As you can well imagine.
Well, also, I would imagine a guy like that who's so forthright about communicating, and I don't know him. I didn't know him, obviously, but from what everybody said, he seemed to be very into being transparent.
Oh, yeah. I say little words, short sentences. Yeah.
But I think I could imagine if I'm in his shoes, the thing isn't necessarily dismissing. It's the lack of communication about it that, if you conduct yourself a certain way, you kind of expect a certain level of that back. Although, in the big picture of life, I've learned like that's the kiss of death. If I have my expectations of, others to behave in a certain manner, I really don't, I need to drop that, but you sort of do expect a certain, and I bet that was equally troubling.
Yeah, I think, I like what you're saying, because if you want to be treated well, you have to start out by treating people well.
Man,
that always accomplish it, but it certainly won't accomplish it if you don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely.
There's a risk and an investment in every enterprise we undertake. And one of the things I really found out was how good Chet was at trusting the right people. And none of us hit 100%, but his batting average was way on up there. Anytime I met somebody that worked with Chet, and it was just automatically, we were kind of pre-certified to each other, and so that was the other thing about hanging out with him, I would say, was that you met everybody, because everybody wanted to meet Chet. And whatever was traveling, I would just sit here, and everybody would come through, So that's how I met Lenny Breau and Earl Klugh and George Benson and Martin Knopfler. Everybody, they all wanted to meet Chet.
That's so cool, man.
Caught in his tailwind, as it were.
Hey, lucky you.
I know. Too bad, huh? So if I think about that quartet being that one project like that, I think this project I'm working on with Tom Emanuel right now is a duet project, and I think it's been that same way where we came up with an idea a couple of years ago and started looking for songs that fit the idea, and it was to be guitar duets. And Tommy knew that quartet record. That was a record that's how he first heard about me. Okay. And by this time, I'd heard Tommy play, and I remember the first time I heard Tommy, I was just really knocked out. But I couldn't imagine us doing anything together because we seemed so different. And at a meeting of the Chet Atkins Appreciation Society, somebody saw us both in the same room. Hey, let's get John and Tommy to play something. And we thought, well, whatever, So we played Avalon, and we just clicked, And we both looked at each other and went, how about that? So Tommy then says, I know what let's do. Let's make a Christmas record. So we did a Christmas duets record. And from the time he said that, we just immediately started figuring out how to work together. And what it is, we both have Chet roots. And he's kind of goes off to be like the pop rocker who comes back to acoustic fingerstyle.
Right.
I'm the classical guy who makes his way back around to fingerstyle. And so both of us have taken these journeys into the woods and come back with approaches which are still grounded in our experience working with Chet. And so beyond that, I don't know for sure how it is we work together so well, but I love working with him. And so I feel like the work I'm doing with him, it challenges me, it rewards me, and it's fun to do. So that makes. I'm looking forward. The project is pretty close to done, and we'll be out, beginning of next year. We did all over the place. We started off looking for just songs about love was the first thing, and so we did Cold Cold Heart, But then we did How Deep Is Your Love from the Bee Gees. But they're all over the map.
I think I watched the video of you guys. I think you were playing. There's a couple of videos online, and it was funny because that's the first thing I thought. I said, these two playing together. That's surprising because it's just not, but man, I'll tell you what, once you started playing, there was not a shred of, it was seamless, man. It wasn't like you made it work. You would have thought you guys play together all the time. That's what you do. It sounded great. And, Tommy took his role and you took your role and you adapted to each. It was really cool, man.
That's right. And that's exactly what I remember. A little ways in, I said, so what is it with you and me? We were having a cup of coffee and he said, I know. He says, you know how to be John and I know how to be Tommy. Let's don't talk about it.
Yeah, so he's right. Because sometimes, you start analyzing something and it's like, well, maybe it's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. No, it sounded great because, I wanted to do some research on you when I was putting the questions together and everything. And I think I saw the Bee Gees video. It was one of the things I saw of the two of you guys playing together. And he's, I'll tell you one thing that's different. Your physical demeanors, when he starts playing, his eyes close and he's super intense. And I know you have the same intensity, but your body language is totally different, man. It's like, I don't know how obviously you've spent time on this. I'm sure it's just not a natural thing. Nothing's natural when you're at that level, but your physical, and which is what you have to do to perform at that level without freaking out. You got it down. But that was a very interesting, and I'm not saying he's stressed out. I'm just saying his physical,
he's more animated than I am.
Yeah, his intensity is more animated.
He's used to the thing about him is he can hold a room of 2,000 people with just a guitar. So, he's animated, and we've passed through rock and roll. I've passed through the classical thing.
Yeah.
We each bring that back to the collaboration. And the other thing is, though, I mentioned our Chet roots. The other thing is he really cares about the audience. And that's the same reason I play music. It's so that I can reach people. Now, we each have our own way of doing it.
Sure, of course.
It's about doing all this work so that we can be heard and so that we can move people. So when we work together, that's our shared objective. I think that really makes it work. And the other thing is, he's really good. He's actually,
yeah.
Steve's saying this it was always a little nerve-wracking to play around Chet because Chet was nervous. Tommy's not nervous. Tommy knows why he's there, knows what he came to do. And so it makes playing with him very comfortable on stage. I love doing it, and in the studio too. And then we've worked out the arrangements. He's traveling around all the time, and I'm sitting still. So some of them are at my house, some of them are at the coffee shops, some of them are Skype. Skype setup, right? And so we keep little by little. And then other people would say, "Well, if you're doing that," I remember somebody saying, "Well, if you're doing love songs, you should do a lullaby. That's a love song." And somebody else said, "You should do Billy Joel's lullaby."
Right.
And I go listen to see what it was. "Good Night, My Angel." Well, it's gorgeous. So some of the ideas, as people have realized we are putting these tunes together, have come just from people knowing us and suggesting tunes, not us just kind of thinking of tunes. But ultimately, the collection is from all over the place. So I'm really excited about how it's coming together, and I look forward to letting people see the whole thing.
One of the things that you said early on that was like, to me, really indicative of your work ethic was when you said, I wanted to teach students, and my barometer for if I'm serving them, if I'm earning my money basically, is not how happy they are. It's, am I seeing them make progress? And I was so impressed with that because I've taken music. I'm taking music lessons now, but I've taken lessons like everybody else from a bunch of different people. And 99% of the time, it's some version of this when you walk in. So what do you want to work on today? How the hell do I know? That's why I'm coming to you. You're asking me. You might as well ask me, what do I want to do? How do I want to repair your car? If I knew, I wouldn't be here.
I would do that. That's right. Exactly.
You're asking the total wrong guy, because I'm not going to come up with the right answer no matter what I say, because I don't know, but
the big part of it. The other piece of it to me is that you have to remember what they did last week. And sometimes I would make little notes at the margin of their music book and say, so how's it been going?
Yeah.
And whatever they would say, I would make them refine it a little bit. I wouldn't accept, pretty good. I said, in what sense pretty good?
Yeah, yeah.
We're talking about the first measure. We're talking about what went pretty well, or geez, it's not been a good week. Oh, did you have trouble with that measure? I'd make them clarify so that now they're evaluating their own work. Because that's how I got better, because I evaluated my own work. So that's a lot of what I'm teaching them, is my method of working, not just the notes I'm playing. So,
well, now you have a specific of, you're struggling with this. Great, let's handle that. Not like, that was really impressive, to be honest, when you said that, because that's a good indicator. That, to me, it's the little subtle things about what people say that really good markers of, like, it's things like work ethic and stuff like that. And that was really, I did not come by that automatically. I had to teach myself how to do it. Yeah. Paying attention to what was going on. I remember the first time somebody played something for me that there was no flaws in it. But all of a sudden I was evaluating them on a musical level. And I had to say, okay, now the first time you played these right here, and then when this recurred with that same material, and by the time you got to here, I feel like you didn't fulfill the promise you made in these 8 bars. I thought, what am I even saying? And what I was saying was he'd lost concentration. He'd forgotten what he did. And he said, oh, okay. So we went back and did the whole thing. I said, okay, that's what I'm looking for. That was pretty, but it also showed I was listening. Yeah, right. And all I did then was really ask him, please listen as closely as I'm listening. Yeah. To yourself. Sure. And so that's a huge piece of advice. But I remember the first time it happened, it's almost like, how did I know to say that? And after that, now I know to do that, to really say, and to sometimes spot very odd little things that seem to be disrupting the force, as we would say, being able to do this well. And this was kind of stumbled out in a big interview a couple of years ago, and somebody was asking me about being a good teacher and a good player, that's an unusual combination. And I thought about it a minute, and I said, I think maybe I set out to be a better teacher than most players and a better player than most teachers. Yeah. And what I mean by that is both are important. I don't expect to be the world's best player or the world's best teacher, but I want to be good enough in both categories that I can sit at the table with my peers and be proud of my work. But they're both important to me. And they're both mutually exclusive. They have nothing to do with one another. Yeah.
And no, they're really different, but together they make a complete human experience with music. So you get to play for others. They're both also about sharing and about generosity. Yes. Because in one case you're doing it for the audience, in the other case you're doing it for somebody who's trying to learn. But you open yourself up in a way, in the same sense, once in performance and the other one in sharing how you learn, how you work.
Is there a third experience you can come up with? The first was Nashville Guitar Quartet. The second was Tommy, the duets.
This one will knock your socks off.
Yeah, man.
It's not one of those. But recently, Tommy and I have noticed how many young players are learning his music because of YouTube and because of him playing all over the planet. And somebody said something a couple of years ago about some of the young guns coming up, and I thought, young guns is not a shootout. And so I said, what about young thumbs? They're all thumb style, And so we started putting a group together called the Young Thumbs. We're tracking them down and organizing them and working with them. We're helping them get scholarships. We're making sure they know about opportunities. We're performing with them. And so working with this next generation of players to make sure they're really connected to the legacy, to the experience that we've had. Because there's about a 15-year gap in there, maybe a 20-year gap, when people aren't learning to play the guitar. They're doing video games and disco and synthesizers and all that, but guitar is back with a vengeance right now.
I think so, man.
So Tommy and I are really trying to bridge that gap to make sure that everything we've acquired and learned, all the opportunities we've had, are connected to the next generation. So I would say that's the other big thing I find myself doing right now. When I was doing the True Fire project, I worked with a young player, Kirby Easler, to help me do the notation because she's really good at transcribing now. I've got another, Caitlin Preboy, is really good with audio. She's helping me get all my audio that I've collected over the years. She's become my audio archivist. I performed with Parker Hastings in various places. And so there's a bunch of them out there doing good work. And I'm trying to do, and Chet modeled it. He said, here's this. Come on, let's do this. Send me a bill for that. Make sure you pay, do all that stuff. So not just the guitar playing, but modeling everything that I've learned. And it's put me in a position of being grateful for what I've learned. And part of gratitude is sharing. So
it's nice. You're being of service, Yeah. That's really cool. Let's. I have a funny feeling I know the answers to this, but I want to ask you anyway. You grew up in Dallas or Fort Worth? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Houston.
In Houston, okay.
And I was born in Waco, which I used to have to explain to everybody where that was.
Yeah, not now.
Kind of put itself on the map. Houston from first grade on, and through high school. And so then I went to TCU, which was the same church school that my dad was a preacher in, so that's how come I went there.
Gotcha.
Free tuition,
Yeah.
Scholarship.
Free tuition is good.
Excuse me.
What was your childhood like?
I grew up with a substantial family in the neighborhood, so that I would say 5 aunts and uncles and the corresponding cousins.
Well,
and among those, I had my dad loved classical music. I always heard church music. Had another uncle who sang in a glee club. Another uncle who was really into jazz. My mom loved country music. So I heard all this stuff. Now, none of them, my uncle played a little bit of guitar, not much, but he's the one that kind of got me to see the guitar as a thing. But I was surrounded by music, and when they saw that I took an interest in it, the entire family structure wanted to know what I was up to. And I got huge support from family to develop the skill. My dad loved music, but he was also a really good athlete. So I have another brother who got the spin off from that, So I definitely grew up in a very supportive setting with lots of music around. And the other thing about church, when you're the preacher's kid, unless you're just a jerk, everybody likes you. So
yeah,
with hugs and pats on the head for my work from the get-go.
Right,
so it surprised me to stand in front of the audience and say something and have people appreciate it. I just was kind of born into that. It doesn't seem that odd to me.
You might find this interesting. I'm actually putting an article together about this because one of the questions I get asked often is, because I've interviewed so many people, what do you find, is there common traits amongst the most successful guitarists? One of them is almost all of them had tremendous family support. Even if they had a dysfunctional family, alcoholism, whatever, the ones that, there was 2% maybe that didn't, but 98% of the people really had tremendous support from others. And I think that's a critical component as to why they became successful.
Yeah, I think that, and I hear people say all the time something about me being so talented, and I'm thinking, that's not how I feel about that. I know I can do this, but I don't feel like it's talent. I feel like it's kind of a natural tendency and a curiosity combined with availability and support. That those things all of a sudden got me going, that lifts me up to a level where I can do it at more than a medium level. Beyond. So by the time I remember my dad telling me this. I didn't remember it at the time, but he would play his classical recordings for me, but he also had some recordings that were like 78s that had children's stories, Rumpelstiltskin, all that stuff. But the music in the background was all, Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and all that stuff. So he wanted me to hear classical music. So he would put his records on, and I would say, "Oh, that's Rumpelstiltskin," and he realized I had tagged.
That's smart.
Music and stories. So then he started telling me, "No, that's Tchaikovsky." And so now my big card trick was to, trot little Johnny out and put on classical music, and I would say, "Oh, that's Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony," and so forth. So
that's cool. Did your dad, was he a preacher? Like, did he have a job outside of that? What kind of work did he do?
His real gig. Yeah.
His real gig was as a preacher.
Yeah.
Did your mom work or?
No, she just raised us.
Yeah.
And that's back when a lot of households were like that. So that would have been the 40s.
Yeah.
And it meant that I had more access to my mom than I did my dad in terms of clock time.
Sure.
And, I mentioned that my dad kind of was so supportive of music. And I think from mom, I got all those conversations. Like, for instance, I've always been short. And so by the time I'm out in the world, I'm the first kid that everybody picks on.
Yeah.
I'm the little guy, I'm the easy one, the easy target. And so she sat down and explained to me, she said, "Well, you're always going to be short, so let's work with that."
That's pretty great. And that's reality, man. That's great.
there's a lot of these guys who are bullies mostly just don't know how to make friends. So
they're just and they're coming from it. They're getting beat on. It's coming down from the top. They're getting picked on at home, or they're unhappy, and
And so I said, if you learn to make friends with bullies, then you'll be home free, because nobody picks on a bully's friends. And so she told me that, and I'm like in first grade walking to school, and I'm saying, stop, let's be friends. We're the kind of first graders version of.
That's cool, man. No, but how cool is that she sat you down and gave you a dose of reality? It didn't say, nowadays it's you come home and tell me and we'll have the cops at their house or something like that. Or,
or your dad says, well, you're going to have to get some gloves and learn how to beat him up,
Right.
And I got instead the mom's perspective, which was, if you stop and think about what's going on and think about who's involved. And so, as a part of all that, I think is where I cultivated my ability to have a wide array of friends in terms of personalities and
how to get along with people too. That's huge, man.
Without being judgmental or that kind of stuff. Not that I never am, of course we all are, but it doesn't. I sometimes think if I introduced all my friends to each other, they may have a fist fight, about something, but I don't.
Yeah. What were some of the bigger obstacles or some of the obstacles in general that you had to overcome throughout this, your whole musical journey, either business, personal, music related?
I think the thing that kind of took me a while to sort it out, I would trace back to two or three things. One is my mom and dad really grew up in a depression when every nickel counted and you never knew if you had work and all that. So the idea of me being a professional musician seemed pretty out there to them. And also, if you look on my dad's side, there's professors and preachers and like that going all the way back generations. So the school is like a big thing. So I think, we all get from our parents that kind of well-wishing thing that sometimes feels like a burden as well as an encouragement. And I think I just took it too literally for a while until I realized this is my life and I can call my own shots. And for me, that meant hitting my mid-20s with a PhD in physics, And I remember thinking, something, I think I've checked off all the boxes. I think I'm home free. I've turned my homework in.
Yeah.
What now? And I felt it was very liberating to kind of come out on the far side of all that.
I give you a ton of credit because, being in your young 20s, it's not, you don't have a lot of coping skills then. And I think to have the sort of courage to do that, because when you have family pressure, especially academic families, man, it's a lot of pressure. I've met a lot of people who had that. Yeah. And then the fact that your folks came out of the depression, I mean, really kudos to them for encouraging and supporting you, because they were a very small minority who came out of not only depression, but academia, and then said, hey, you know what? This is not about us. It's about him.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I left Texas Instruments, Becky and I made the decision. I turned in my resignation and had everybody at Texas Instruments going, why? And then, I forgot to tell my mom and dad. So I really wasn't checking in with them by that time.
Yeah.
And I called them up, and there was no long silence. And they said, oh, man, that's great. We know you'll be great at it. And we've always thought that. I thought,
wow.
Is it the same people that brought me up? And the answer is no, because they've grown up just like I have.
Yeah.
And now that I'm a dad, I realize I'm not the same person that birthed my kids.
Absolutely.
I'm the father. I'm the grandfather of their kids now. So You do see things differently as you grow up.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'd like to continue growing. So.
Well, and you tend to get, I know with me, I've tended to get much more open, much less stringent, much more accepting. And, like I said, it's not about me. It's about you. I don't have, this is your life. I have no right to have expectations.
Yeah, I've done my part. I've got you started, and you have my support from here on. And please overlook some of the crap I tossed your way, because it was the best I could do at the time.
At the time, yeah, man. I've had the same conversation with my guys, so trust me. Anything else? You had said one of the things you said, with your parents, the depression mentality. Anything else that was difficult or challenging?
I think I lived in such a supportive environment. I didn't see much of that kind of stuff. I do remember one of the things that really sticks with me was by the time I'm 6, I'm taking accordion lessons. Mm-hmm. And looking back on it, now that I've been a teacher, I realized my accordion teacher was through the roof good.
That's great.
And some of the things I learned from him, I still visualize music with the buttons and the keys. Look at me hold my hands up while I say that, you know.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But the buttons are arranged like the cycle of keys, like the C button is in the middle, and just above it is the G, and below it is the F. So there's the 1, 4, 5 thing that all us guitar players realize. It's a circle of fifths, only it's in rows. Mm-hmm. And over here on the keyboard side, there's the black and white keys and the scales and the exercises. And so by the time I really started to teach myself the ukulele, I had a really deep understanding for a kid of how music was put together and organized. So my first ukulele tunes were like Lady of Spain and all those famous accordion, Oh Solo Neo, which is It's Now or Never. When Elvis, was a big accordion solo back then. So I was playing those things on the ukulele, which was not what everybody else was doing at the time. It prepared me to hear solo guitar later.
Yeah.
So if I could go back and Mr. Turner passed away while I was still a kid. And I've often thought if I could go back and visit with anybody and have a conversation, he's the one.
Your accordion teacher.
Yeah, my accordion teacher, yeah.
That's nice, man. If you had to go back, John, and give yourself, the younger John, advice, is there anything that you think you would have benefited from, assuming you'd been open to hearing?
Yeah, I think about that one a lot. And on the one hand, I think surely I could have done with some better advice early on. And then but when I think about that, I'm so happy with where I am right now that I'd be afraid to tamper.
Yeah.
And somebody pointed out there's a country song out there right now. I think it's Rascal Flatts. God bless the crooked road that led me straight to you. And that's exactly how I feel about the crooked path that's led me straight to today.
Yeah.
Along the way, whatever stumbles I've been, but also whatever I've been able to harvest, and acquire in terms of skill and knowledge and perspective, I'm not willing to trade any of that in on where it's gotten me, because at the moment, I wake up this morning, you and I get to have a great interview, had a good cup of coffee, if I've started asking for one, I'm thinking, are you kidding?
Yeah, and you never know. You make one tweak here that turned better here, but you don't know. Maybe you make the wrong left turn, so you don't see another opportunity or meet another person, or health wise or whatever.
So I think a lot of the stumbling around I did was more because it just takes time, and also I think one thing that I've had to kind of temper in myself is that I'm fascinated by almost everything. And I've had to learn how to set some of that aside and focus on things that really are important to move me forward. But if we were somewhere, like when Tom Bresh and I get together, we'll play a little bit of music, then we'll get the Max out and he'll start talking about video editing. And days later, we've gone through all the upgrades and all. So I've got a real techno weenie buried deep inside me that
sure
take me way down that rabbit hole if I wanted to go there.
That's all right. Curiosity's good, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's paid off,
Hey, let's talk about gear for a few minutes, and let me have a complete disclosure letting you know I know nothing about acoustic. So you're going to be flying solo on this because of my limited knowledge base on it. But my listeners know quite a bit. So I think it's important that they hear it. What is your go-to guitar right now, and what other, let's say, 2 guitars would round out your top 3?
Yeah. So I would say that without a doubt, it's a guitar that was made for me by Kirk Sand. And it's about the 3rd or 4th guitar he's made me. And plus he's also worked on several of my favorite classic guitars, which one of them is, both of them, 2 of them are Konos, but Kohno, Japanese classical builder. And so what Kirk did was make the neck a little more comfortable. And then he made it work where the guitar had a voice that worked well with the pickups that I could play for a larger audience. And then in addition to that, Kirk is a good player, and he's heard me play for 25 years. We just collaborated on a lot of stuff. And so this back and forth conversation, I feel like the conversation I've had with Kirk over years has given me a guitar that responds to my touch and my voice. So it's nylon strings. If a classical player picks it up, it doesn't feel quite right. But if an acoustic player picks it up, it feels like high action. And how can you play this? Classical player looks at it, it's set up like a sissy. So I was really in between, not high action, but a good voice. And to me, good sustain throughout the register and no big peaky notes because it gets in the way. I'd much rather have a neutral guitar that I can control the voice of. And so that's what Kirk and I have evolved. But you go back as a kid, and the first thing I had after that ukulele, well, I left my ukulele, I took it to the beach, I took it everywhere, and one of my brothers stuck it up in the rear window, and it melted, so now I have to buy. So the next ukulele I had was a baritone Martin, which is and I realize now, I wish I still had it, probably $1,000 ukulele.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a good one, and I was playing that, and that's when I heard Chet and realized I needed those two bass strings. And so another uncle who worked at Sears had sold more washing machines than anybody, so he got me a Sears guitar, which was terrible. And it was so big, I couldn't even hold it in my lap. And so I kind of put off playing the guitar until I found a 3/4 size Gibson. I think, is it like an LGO, that model? I bet, that they're still out there, sunburst and 3/4 size. And finally, a guitar that I could, hold on to. And I remember it was acoustic, steel strings, and I bought a pickup to put in the sound hole when those came out. The wire kind of dangled out so I could plug it in. And that's when I was trying to sound like Chet.
Right.
And then when the Gretsch showed up.
Okay.
And those things were like $500 or $600 for the 6120 with the signature and everything. And so I was playing by then at a Hawaiian restaurant. And I put all the money aside, and I bought that Gretsch. And so now it's thumb pick, Gretsch, and the Gretsch of that day, the fingerboard kind of got weird on me. So I traded it in on a Gibson. And the Gibson was, I think it was a 355. There was stereo.
So it was like a 345, but stereo. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also, the neck was joined the body way down the way. So Gibson had to take it out of the line because they couldn't keep it, the neck stable. So Gibson said, well, we'll give you anything to replace it. And that was pretty big of them back then. And so I got a Gibson Birdland.
Oh, very cool.
It was smaller, but then I realized the neck was too skinny for me. And so I played it for a long time, still with a thumb pick. And now that I'm studying physics, I'm not playing out much anywhere. And I got myself a $200 Gibson Classic, like the Charlie Bird model, that was out back then. Or Roger Miller played one. One of Jerry Reed's early guitars is that. I see
Gotcha.
that. You see people look on YouTube, you'll see what I had. And it was pretty much the front door with strings, not a great guitar at all. But it really got me onto the nylon strings and feeling that again. And I think to some extent reconnected me with my ukulele days where the nylon string was a big thing. And so by that time, the classic guitar scene was popping up in Dallas, and I saw a really good classic guitar for the first time in my life. And holy crap, I don't know about that.
Where'd you see it?
It was real nice. Ramirez Classical, but it was too big for me. It was like Segovia size,
right?
Which I'm not. And then Kono came up with some guitars, and they had all the good guitars there in that shop. And so I guess I've owned 3 different Konos, classical, Japanese classical back there. And that's what Kurt was seeing when he built my go-to guitar now. And then I have a couple of other guitars that my son has right now. One of them is a cheap classic with one of those pickups like Willie Nelson had, that Chet had used on the road. He said, here, you need a pickup, in that guitar. So that's another thing. All the time he was seeing what I needed.
It's an incredible, yeah.
So I would say that the Kirk Sand is number 1, and there's really not number 2 and a 3 right now.
Gotcha.
That's where those other guitars are, and I have visitation rights.
Visitation rights. I never heard that like that.
I can go to George Winter Carter Guitars, and I can see my life story there on the wall there.
Did I had a question. Do you ever play electric? Do you ever play electric?
Oh, yeah. For a long time with the Gretsch, I played electric. I played with an amp. I played and also, I skipped a whole thing here. I played in my high school big band, but there were 2 guitar players and no bass player. And the other guitar player knew more than I did, so I became the bass player, like an upright acoustic. So I did that for 3 years. Huge in my understanding of Now I treat the bass strings on the guitar as if it were an upright bass.
Gotcha.
So now I'm thinking like an orchestra, not just a guitar. And so when I think of myself later as a successful arranger and composer, a lot of it has to do with having driven a band from the bottom.
Gotcha.
Like Paul McCartney playing bass in the Beatles always made sense to me.
Can I see your hand, your left hand? You're righty, correct?
Yeah. There's
I'm just curious, like, 'cause if I go near an acoustic guitar, I'm just I just imagine anybody who plays acoustic, your thumbs are all, I mean, your fingers are all ripped up, but no, that's not the case.
No, I've got little baby's butts.
Yeah.
A very light touch.
Yeah.
I cultivated that on purpose. I remember, again, still before I had seen anybody up close, listen to the records and then playing along. And one day, I think this was probably a freshman in college, and I'm listening to Johnny Smith play something. It's so smooth, and I'm listening to me play something, and it sounds like I have gloves on, boxing gloves.
Yeah.
And I thought, something, what they're doing and what I'm doing cannot be the same thing. And I turned off the record player and sat in front of that mirror in the dorm room, when you adjust your tie before you got a little tape, and watched myself play. And I thought, this cannot be it. And so I quit playing and just started moving my fingers like a dancer. This is what I want to look like when I play. And then I went back and just kind of reinvented my technique to be what you see when you see those YouTube videos now. So that's not my first generation technique. That's me. So in one way, I'm a child learner. Then I become an adult learner. Then I become a classical player, so I'm an adult relearner. Then I moved to Nashville, and I'm an adult relearner again. So I really have a lot of connection to people who have had to adapt or learn as adults. And when people say I'm too old to learn, I say, get out of here.
That doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, you learn differently as an adult than you do as a child. But I still feel like my learning engine is well intact. And that's another thing about hanging out with Chet. He was always looking forward. He was never looking back.
Yeah. There's very little benefit to looking back anyway, I find. It never serves you, as a matter of fact, especially like when you're down in it and you got something going on, man. The worst thing to do is to look back. That never serves you, man.
And you don't want to look too far forward. You want to think about, like, okay, in fact, here's my way of practicing. I'll play something and I'll listen to it and I'll say, okay, what's the one thing that if I fixed it would make the biggest difference in the outcome?
That's really clever, man. Yeah, because you can work on one thing.
Yeah. It might be the starting tempo. It might be the one change in the bridge that you need to smooth out. Whatever it is, you fix that, and everything else around it falls in a better place. And then you look tomorrow and go, what you're going for is a day that the next thing you need to fix is something the audience will never notice. But still.
I like that. Work on the one thing you listen to that'll help your playing. Yeah, because everybody could work on one thing.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I think, to me, we've said it several times today, but small bites off of a big serving.
Totally, man.
And then you'll clean the plate at some point. So, something, I think I've got patience in there somewhere, don't I?
Yeah, you do, man.
It doesn't bother me to tackle something that I can't do yet at all. Because I know that if I nibble away at it, I'll get closer and closer to being able to do it.
I know Tommy being there, but name a couple of players you've really enjoyed jamming with, and maybe somebody else that you'd like to jam with.
Mm-hmm. Some of the guys that came through Chet's office, I remember the first day I met Mark Knopfler.
Wow.
And in typical fashion, Chet had been out of the studio doing something. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know who he was or what they were doing. And Chet says, John, you know Mark, don't you? Like he does,
I was just thinking, he's saying, Mark, you know John Knowles, right? Yeah, that's exactly what was going through my head.
You guys play some things. So he and I sat down and started playing. And I come home, and there's a picture of Guitar Player magazine. He's on the cover. So Mr. Alert here. And I said to my son, hey, this guy was in Chet's office today. And my son said, Dad, that's not this guy. That's Mark Knopfler. And he was like my son's hero, So,
he's just...
And so,
really great.
So Mark and I just, fell into playing some things together, and nothing in particular, but I just loved the relaxed nature of playing for Chet while he was making phone calls. And I never played much with Jerry Reed, but we passed the guitar back and forth, and that was always fun to watch him think out loud. And his technique was so different than mine but his way of thinking about the guitar was really much like a crossword puzzle solver. He figured out the clever ways to do unusual things. I loved playing some with Lenny Breau because he had a very different way of doing things, but he could explain what he was doing. A lot of things Lenny couldn't explain, like how to drive a car or anything like that. But if it was about music, well, I'm voicing this chord this way because it goes with that scale. And I put this finger here because it helps me make this shift. And so playing with those guys, you really learn a lot about how they think. Earl Klugh was always fun to play with. So mostly all the guys that just came through Chet's office. Now there's people I see on YouTube that I'd love to meet at some point. Some of them are the young players, and some of them are older than young, but not as old as me. And I'd love to travel around the world if it were convenient and sit down and play with some of the people I see on YouTube. Because, man, there's some great thinkers and original players coming out. Some of them are classical players. Some of them are jazz guys. Again, I have that really wide appetite.
John, I smell newsletter. I smell new newsletter. John's, travels around the world. There you go. And you video it. Boom.
Well, I think that one of the things I'm excited about the TrueFire thing is that that's a much easier way for people to find me. That is just you click your mouse and there I am.
Well, and they have such distribution. Their distribution network is so wide. So
absolutely the right infrastructure for me to be stepping into as a teacher. And the fact that I've worked with the Quarterly means I've thought about media as a teaching environment, so that step into that production environment where they understand the production and the distribution, and I'm bringing what I know. It feels like a really great working partnership right now. There's that partnership thing, and that's another thing I learned from Chet, is how to work with other musicians and have something to show for it. It's huge.
It is. Desert Island Discs. This is going to be a toughie. Top three, no particular order, and just knee-jerk reaction because you could change them tomorrow.
Yeah, the first thing that comes up is Bill Evans, the Village Vanguard sessions.
The piano.
Piano guy, yeah. And I remember falling in love with him a lot, not knowing what he was doing. But then when I met Lenny, and Lenny had figured out so much of what he was doing, he started listening with different ears. And a lot of what Lenny Breau came up with was adapting what he heard Bill Evans do, keyboard ideas, to the guitar. And so I've said something about thinking like a bass player, but I also think like a keyboard player on the guitar a lot.
You'd be shocked how many guitar players are inspired by jazz pianists.
Yeah, those guys we got something we can do that they can't, but they got something they can do that we can't.
Yeah, and
they can play a lot more notes, and so what I have to do is find out how I can sketch where they have the opportunity to paint. Still get the idea across. And of course, I have the power of tone and touch way beyond what they have at the piano. They're separated from the string by a device. I've got my hands right on it, and I'm hugging the guitar, and you just can't ask for a better circumstance.
Sure.
So I would say that for sure. In some ways, even if I ended up on a desert island with no player, I would have maybe a third of Chet's whole library in my head, where I can listen and not only know what everything sounds like, but I know the gap between that and the next track and what key. That's how long I listen to that stuff, going on. And then other than that, I think I would listen to some great singer-songwriters. Billy Joel would be in that class. Don Schlitz is one of my favorite writers here in town. I'm really listening to songwriters because of partly what my son does, but also when you live in this town. And I think what I like about that is language has rhythm and shape and breath and melody kind of built into it. And so to me, when I think about composing and arranging, learning how to strum a few chords and sing the song is like the entry point, for that. I like listening to, maybe I would grab a Frank Sinatra or a Barbra Streisand album because they can hire the best arrangers.
Yeah.
Both of them really knew how to command great work from everybody else in the room. So Barbara and Frank would be in that class,
I just interviewed Billy Joel's guitar player earlier this week. Really, really cool guy.
Oh, yeah.
Been with Tommy Burns. He's been with them 28 years.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I've never seen any of these guys. I just know their work. I did one time watch Bill Evans, the community college where I was in Dallas, brought him in, and this was probably it would have been the 70s until he was gone in the 80s. But he was traveling around with the bass player and the drummer and doing community college gigs, and he opened up the floor for questions. And I asked him a technical question, and he said, "I don't think everybody wants to hear us talk about that." And he was probably right, but I want to.
Yeah. Hey, what's the most important thing you've learned about yourself over this journey?
I would say I probably learned to trust my own instincts more, and I've learned how important it is to have that circle of family and friends around. I mentioned Becky and I for 53 years. We've navigated so much stuff, life decisions, relationships. I've learned a lot about people from watching how people interact with her. We've raised kids together. We've got grandkids. Our oldest granddaughter is about to head off to college tomorrow.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
And our youngest grandson is 2, just beginning to express his own views on things, So I think I've kind of learned where I fit in the scheme of things, to the extent that of course, it's a mystery that's bigger than me. And it doesn't bother me that I don't know everything. But I feel like at this moment and for these years, I understand my place in things in a way that enables me to think about something to do next, what else I still want to learn, what I'm engaged in with the next generation. So I feel pretty fortunate, in that way. A good cup of coffee and a place to sit in the morning and think about it.
You like coffee because you mentioned it several times. I do as well.
Yeah.
Most important person in your life? I
would say it's musically, it's had to have been Chet, because of the opportunities he opened up. But then I would say the person that I've really gone through the years with has been Becky.
Sure.
And she understands me in a way that sometimes I forget that I do. She sees things about me that I may not see myself, When I got back from doing the first True Fire things, I showed her the proofs of what we had. She was looking at this True Fire video, and I wanted to see what she had to say. And her comment was, "It's you." I thought, check.
Right.
So she's also working on something. She'll say, "I think there's a better chord goes there. That's not as good as you played it yesterday." I get all those little sidebar things. For her observation was, "It's you."
That's great. That's the best thing she could say, probably.
Yeah.
Most important thing your dad taught you?
Well, the music stuff is pretty obvious, but I also think I watched my dad kind of function as a human who was in his community. This is back in the time when I grew up, when the newspaper would have always gone to a preacher to get a quote about what was going on, And you would ask the mayor, a preacher, and somebody else. Is kind of how you wrote the newspaper, So I remember my dad being one of the first people that spoke about integrating the school system, things like that. So I saw my dad step up and really take leadership in the community. And even though I've come to Nashville as a stranger, I've ended up, knowing the council members and governors and everybody. I just kind of meet those people and I feel like I'm a part of it. Like a citizen,
Yeah.
A lot of what my dad did. I'm not running for office, and I'm not on anybody's committee or anything like that, But I feel like and Chet was a participant in the life of the city, so I feel very much like a Nashvilleian in that way. So,
how about Mom? Most important thing she taught you?
Well, I tell you, more than anything else, she just gave me perspective, I would say, on things. I remember when television first came out, there would be commercials, and I'd be watching television, and she would say things like, "You realize that guy's just trying to sell you something, right? Because you notice he said this, but he didn't say that," and how to read what's going on and make sense of it.
Wow, that's pretty. Your mom is really pretty cool, man.
Pretty perceptive.
Yeah.
And later on, how you get to where you think, oh, Mom, she doesn't know what's going on. And I think, incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah. She's really pretty sharp and very, also the things that she told you were typically things that a male would tell you. They're not, especially for back then.
That's right. And I think that had a lot to do with
That's very cool.
Around more than my dad. They obviously conferred about the child rearing thing. They were on the same page. But I do think a lot of the talks that guys would have with their dads, I had with my mom. Yeah, a good observation.
Yeah, that's great. Biggest business or personal win?
I think it was that moment, which took place over about 2 days, really, when Becky and I made the decision to, regroup and leave Texas Instruments and focus on music. We'd already made big decisions like deciding to get married, we had a kid and all that, what everybody looks at like big life decisions. But this mid-course correction is huge. And both of us look back on that. Every now and then Becky will say, every now and then I'll think about, oh my God, what would have happened if we hadn't done it? And she can't imagine life without that decision being made the way it was made. And I heard her talk about it to other people. It's one of the things she said, one of the things we learn from it is that when we jump and land, we don't break, we bounce. That's
good, man.
You can see how we can rate the songwriter at our house.
Yeah. I'm writing that down. That's very cool. Flip side, biggest business or personal disaster?
I think I don't think of things like that because I don't think anything's happened to me that completely put me out of the running or anything like that. I've made some pretty big stumbles. I think of some of the ones that happened on stage. I remember when I was really studying the classic guitar in Dallas, and Robert Guthrie, who was one of the guys who was studying with Segovia, put together a class with 6 of us, and we got together once a week over 10 weeks or something. And at the end of that time, he wanted all the students to perform, and he gave me a huge assignment to play this Bach Prelude, Fugue, and Allegro, and to keep it under control. He said, when you get to the Allegro, don't play the repeat sign to make the piece too long. It was like 10 minutes long. Huge piece at that point for me. And I was having so much fun. I got to that repeat sign and I took it.
And you repeated it.
And I just rocking along, and about 8 bars in, I thought I wasn't supposed to take the repeat. And at that point, you could not have asked me my name. And here I am sitting in front of 100 players and nothing. I mean, you couldn't have asked me my name. And I said, I got nothing. And the audience went, yay! They'd never seen me play that well,
So you took the repeat, you played the whole thing. You had to.
I didn't. I played the second half of the repeat and just got lost because I confused myself.
And you just stopped
at all.
Oh, wow!
Like somebody had unplugged my amp or something. And of course Guthrie was saying, "Why didn't you finish? You could have started again." I said, "Man," at that point there was no brain and no fingers.
Yeah.
I saw it completely just like an out-of-body experience. And the thing that was so funny is I think it's the biggest torpedo I've ever made. And yet the audience came up to me after it, hugged me and loved me, said they never heard me play so great. I forget that. We know how the piece goes. But they saw my investment, And I thought, okay, so what's important and what's not here,
Right.
And it really taught me that. But it was a pretty big torpedo, without a doubt. Then another one I remember, just really funny. I was recording a solo CD, I guess, in Chet's basement. And I was doing something, and I reached for the 7th fret and got the 8th one, and just came trucking to a halt like that. And Chet's on the talk back, and he's laughing. And I said, what? And he said, somebody else's mistakes. They're always funny. And then we backed up, and I just did the tune again, But again, both those cases, I came away realizing that this is not brain surgery. This is what we do. It's important, but it's important not to have to be brought to your knees by the fact that every now and then we stumble.
Yeah, yeah, but the people's reaction, nobody knows sometimes.
Yes, a lot of the time, unless you telegraph it. Yeah.
Do you have any hobbies or interests outside of music, John?
Yeah, I would say the technology stuff is still really strong for me. I'm a sucker for the latest computer or phone, or as my grandkids and whatnot have gotten interested in technology, I'll sit down with them and talk about stuff. So I'd say that's probably, I could geek out pretty easy.
That's cool. Your grandkids probably love it.
Oh yeah. Puppy's cool. So,
I'm going to ask you 3 more questions, man, and I cannot thank you enough. This has really been enjoyable, and
me too. This has really been enjoyable for me too.
Thank you. I'm glad. Most important lesson that your business has taught you in general?
I would say that, well, maybe 2 things. One of them is I've learned that something I'm nuts about, I'm not the only person who cares about this. So if I can put it out there, there's somebody else worrying about it just like I am. So I feel like as a business, the trick is to find my people. And if I do good work, my people will be my customers, That's one thing. But the other one is that once I found my people, I need to continue finding ways and fresh ways to connect to them. So I've had to learn a lot about, with production stuff, software for doing newsletters, how the post office works, how audio works, and how international borders and customs. You have to find out all that kind of technical stuff that goes with. All the objective is not that stuff. That's the infrastructure through which you deliver stuff. And in the time I've been doing this, the fact that keeps changing. So, you heard me a little earlier refer to myself in short pants, the accordion player, Johnny, which was my name because my dad's a John, so I'm a junior.
Okay.
So I'm Johnny when I'm little. So I got myself a folder maybe a year ago now, and I just wrote on the tab, Johnny 2.0. So Johnny is my way of reconnecting with my childhood. 2.0 means the next way of doing this. And that's where I started putting ideas in that folder. That's a kind of a business planning technique, the way an artist might do it. Not the way a CEO might do it. So my first little TrueFire emails went in that folder. The idea that I should be delivering audio instead of CDs, just downloads for the quarterly. All those ideas went in that folder at one point. So it's a business planning tool. I'm trying to think, okay, so far this is how I've talked to my people, but people aren't looking for me there now. They're not looking for the post office to deliver them CDs, and so I'm having to kind of reinvent the infrastructure, the mechanism for doing what I do, which is a business decision. And then Becky and I call ourselves all the time a mom and pop operation. We have business meetings around the kitchen table and make decisions about how we're going to do things. And so I feel like I've got a life partner and a business partner, in that way.
Yeah.
I'd say realizing that I had to kind of invent a way of being in business that was compatible with what I wanted to do as a musician and a teacher is where the huge learning has come in. And it's been, anybody who goes back and listens will see what I've been saying. That story is really, a lot of that has led me to where I am now. So,
well, it's good that the other thing I don't get the sense that you're really good about not putting pressure on yourself. Like you put an idea in there. I don't get the sense that, man, you're nuts to make the idea, to get the solution right away. You just put the idea out there and that's where it starts. And then somehow the answer will either come to you or you'll meet somebody or you'll, and that's a relaxing way of doing things, sort of,
Yeah, and you're right. I said something earlier about patience. I think I have patience. For the most part, I have patience with myself. I mean, every now and then I keep long hours and it's hard work, don't get me wrong. But I think if I know kind of where I'm going, to do a day's worth of hard work, knowing that that's one brick in the path, is a kind of, and I don't know for sure where I get that. We all have like tendencies and that kind of stuff, and I think my ability to have some confidence in my ability I'll eventually get there is pretty strong.
I think probably some of that comes from just being a preacher's son, because the whole concept of faith and that, like you said earlier, the universe is going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And that is kind of tied into that, I think.
Yeah, and it's important to say too, I think the universe will take care of me, but that doesn't mean the grocer will. You still got to take money over to the grocery.
I hear that, man. Yeah, I hear you. Anything you do to make sure that you're getting the most out of life and just enjoying your time as much as possible, or being present?
Yeah, one of the things I think about is I've actually got some professional things that are in the near-term future and some personal things that are in the near-term future. And I think of how I spend my day in terms of those 5 or 6 targets that are out there. One of them recently was I knew that my granddaughter was going to graduate from high school. So that's a target. I want to be available, and I want to be in good health so I can, and I've got a 2-year-old grandson. I want to be in good enough health to run alongside the bicycle when he learns how to play.
Sure.
How to ride, regardless of whether I'm there or not. I don't want to be sidelined. I want to be in this as long as I can. Same thing's true of music. I want to be there for these young players. So it means keeping up my own playing. It means staying creative. And so when I sit down to work each day, I have a sense that I'm working on something that's got an outcome. So I do that a lot. And sometimes that's just a moment where you sit in a chair and you kind of reimagine all the outcomes so that you keep those they're fuzzy targets out there. I'm not a 5-year spreadsheet planner kind of guy.
Sure.
But I understand that impulse. I do it more like an artist would do it by keeping a cloud out there that's got, and how we look at clouds and we see different things.
Yeah. Do you take care of yourself physically? Do you exercise or walk or do something?
Yeah, I'm just nothing amazing.
Yeah.
But I realize I'm at an age where people fall and and get old and lethargic and stuff like that. And I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I've already lost friends who just, we're at that age where that happens. And I've seen other friends that 20 years ago kind of retired and were sitting around in a chair and watching TV.
Ugh.
I don't think so. Both my parents lived into their mid-90s.
Oh, that's great.
So I know, I love Harold Bradley, the guitar player.
Yeah.
If I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. So I might live that long.
That's funny.
Each day you spend some time living in your present so that your future has potential. I'd say.
Man, I have one last question. And again, I can't thank you enough for everything. What's been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years? And has this change been due to something intentional or deliberate you wanted to make, or just a natural process of aging?
I would say my own sense of gratitude for how things have worked out, and it's funny. Even though I know I've worked to accomplish a lot of this, I also feel like a lot's been given to me, so that gratitude has grown. A part of that takes time, so part of it is you get older and you think about it, but I would say that's the biggest difference. And every day when I start the day, we mention the coffee, but coffee and gratitude, a helping of each, And the thing is, different days, gratitude takes different shape. But it just means that to be deeply thankful to everything, to the universe, to the people around you that have allowed you to get this far. And then it kind of tells you what to do next in a way that it gives you, it doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you the attitude to have as you move into your day.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've never been an ungrateful person. I don't mean that. But gratitude as a thing has kind of moved to the forefront for me. So,
man, thank you. I really appreciate everything. Let me tell people where to find you. Please check out John Knowles online. He's got a bunch of stuff. So let me tell you what he's got going on. And if I miss anything or mess it up, please chime in. It's John Knowles, Knowles, and he's got a really cool website at johnknowles.com. He has, first of all, he's got his offline newsletter, and you can find it on Fingerstyle, the Fingerstyle newsletter right there. He has a True Fire video coming out, 2 of them actually. One is a Fingerstyle journals, right, with and then the other one is with Tommy Emmanuel duets, and
I think the work title of that one might be Certified Duets.
Certified Duets, and that's because they're both certified guitar players. Somebody once told me that really it was Certified Guitar Pickers. Which one is it? You were there. You're the first guy.
Yeah, that's actually a great story. What happened was, if you look at Chet's career, it's so long. He starts out Chester Atkins and his Galloping guitar, because that was one of his first big hits. Then he becomes Chet Atkins. Then he becomes Chet Atkins, the Country Gentleman. Then he becomes Chet Atkins, Mr. Guitar. But all those are kind of country things. So as he's making this next move, he wants to kind of leave the country thing behind. So he came up with CGP as a kind of a marketing way to shift the perception of himself. And he didn't say what it was. And so we were all guessing what it was. And one day we were guessing, a certified guitar player was one of the guesses. He said, yeah, that could be it. And a little bit later, it was Country Guitar Picker, just CGP.
Oh.
CGP and signing his name that way, you know. And I've talked to Susan Hackney, who was his PR person at that time. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember the phone call. I'll change the stationery from now on. This album is his way on. And I think part of it is, too, he always, one of the things that was fun about being around him is he appreciated my education, my interest in physics and all that. Because he's one of those kids that, you know, went as far as he could in school and then got out there and started doing it. But he really constantly read things. I remember having conversations with him about quantum mechanics and relativity and all that stuff. I mean, he wanted to know what was going on. He was very well read and surrounded himself with people like that. So the CGP, in a way, was a kind of a degree that he gave himself, but also it was a distinct marketing shift to change his image in the public.
Funny you mention that. That's another characteristic. Almost every successful guitar player, they're pretty well read. Yeah. On loads of different, and they're bright. You know, they may not be, whether they're academically educated or not. You know, you learn so much by reading. You could hang with anybody, and even more so now with the internet and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's and conversations. Of course, you got to filter through it more because it's a library without a librarian right now. Yeah, there's a little too much. And then you have a record coming out with Tommy. Yes. When is that coming out, and what's it about? That's going to be called Heart Songs. It'll be out at the beginning of 2019, and I don't know all the details yet, but we'll probably tour some, and there'll be CDs and downloads, and it's just duets, just the two of us. So we recorded them pretty much live with occasional punch-ins. You know, we rehearsed a lot of those tunes until we could play them. So, and if you go out there on YouTube right now, you can see. I think the Billy Joel Lullaby is out there. There's one of us doing Somewhere from West Side Story. That's a nice song. So the song selection, we had much selecting the songs and then making the arrangements. So 3 years of work of us doing catch-can moments to do duet arrangements of songs that would stick. You know. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the record, man. You got it. John, I can't thank you enough for everything. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for asking. Likewise, man. My pleasure. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend on your social media channels, and we certainly appreciate your support. Thanks so much to John Knowles for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. Please check John out online. It's John Knowles, KNOWLES.com. And also social media. You're on, where can people find you on social media? On Facebook, check out my artist page, which is John Knowles CGP. Great. Are you on Instagram? I haven't done that yet. I'm not that young. Dude, what happened to this technological? I thought you just told me you're the tech wizard. That's your next project, man. You got to set up an Instagram. Check out John Knowles on Facebook. John Knowles, KNOWLES-CGP. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.